Namaskara. Welcome to today's session on the summary of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita starts with Dhritarashtra anxiously inquiring his secretary Sanjaya, Kim akurvat Sanjaya? What did they do? So the entire Bhagavad Gita is told in past tense. So Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta ayuyatsavaha mamaka pandavashaiva kim akurvata Sanjaya. This is what Dhritarashtra asked to Sanjaya, the one and only verse which this Dhritarashtra says in Bhagavad Gita. And in answer to the question asked by Dhritarashtra, Sanjaya describes the battle, and the battle began with blowing of conch shells, drums, bugles, trumpets, horns, and so on. And when Arjuna saw the kinsmen present on the opposite side, he was in grief and refused to fight. So this is the setting scene for Bhagavad Gita. So the entire Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 sections containing 6 chapters, each known as Shadagams, the 6 chapters each, hexade, known as Shadagam in Sanskrit. First Shadagam includes chapter 1 to 6, and it talks about karma and jnana yogas mostly, also about dhyana yoga a bit in 6th chapter. Second Shadagam or section is 7 to 12 chapter, and it talks about bhakti yoga mostly, and also it talks about Krishna and his universal form. And lastly, the third Shadagam, which talks about a few other topics and including the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, it's like total 18 chapters divided into 3 sections. So now let's start our Gita journey. So kind-hearted Arjun gave several reasons not to fight and finally took shelter of Krishna. He accepted Krishna as his guru. Krishna rejected Arjun's weakness and shattered Arjun's argument. Krishna found a unusual problem with Arjun's argument that led to the greatest conversation in the history of mankind. Krishna explained Arjun that all the arguments he was making were indeed the result of his misconception, and the misconception was he was identifying himself with the body. Krishna explained that he is not the body but a indestructible Atma, soul, which roughly translate to in English. And then Krishna said, Vamsam sijinani yatha vihaya navani gruhnati naroparani. As a person puts on new clothes, giving up the old ones, the Atma or soul accepts a new body, giving up the old one. Death is nothing but changing of bodies. And this is what Krishna explains. Krishna also explains the characteristics of this very Atman or soul. And Krishna says, Achedyoyam adahyoyam akledhyo shosya evacha nitya sarvagata sthano rachaloyam sanatana. So in this verse and few other verses, Krishna explains about soul or Atman. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can neither be burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. That's very important. It is always eternally the same. Nityam. The knowledge that you are not the body but soul is known as Sankhya Yoga. And after Sankhya Yoga, Krishna explains about Buddhi Yoga. So Krishna says, Esha te bhete Sankhya Buddhi Yoga tvaman shruno. So Krishna says, as I explained Sankhya, now listen about Buddhi Yoga. So all this knowledge of Atma and body, and you are not the body but the soul or the Atma, is known as Sankhya. But the Buddhi Yoga refers to the devotional Bhakti Yoga. Krishna explained to Arjuna how by engaging into Buddhi Yoga or devotional service, one can become free from the cycle of birth and death. So second chapter kind of acts as a summary of entire Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is covering almost all the topics covered in Bhagavad Gita here. Krishna explains to Arjuna how to control mind and senses and how uncontrolled senses can lead to destruction. He also explained how one can attain the kingdom of God by controlling the senses. In these words, Indriyani indriyatebhyas tasya prajna pratishtita. So one who can control the senses, he is glorified. Arjun, upon hearing this argument's question that if you think that intelligence is better, Buddhi Yoga, as Krishna was talking about, also he gave several other arguments. If the intelligence is better than the fruitive work, then why do you want to engage me in the war? This is such a big work. Krishna then explains that there are 2 ways of self-realization, Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga. And based on the nature of the person, one needs to choose a path. Krishna also explains about Yajna, Sakam and Nishkam Karma Yoga. And he further goes on to give the word of caution about the biggest enemy, lust. Krishna says, Kama Rupena Kaunteya Dushpurena Analena Cha. In the unfolding narrative, Krishna explained the concepts of Karma Yoga, emphasizing the devotional work free from attachment to the results. This is very important, and we'll discuss it in the other videos in detail. He dispels Arjun's misconception that all work leads to bondage, asserting that engaging in right kind of action with a devotional spirit is superior to renouncing the work. So Krishna says like this, Tayosto karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. So the karma yoga is better than karma sannyasa, or renouncing the work. Krishna urges Arjun to fight not merely to avoid the sinful reactions, but also to set an example of duty. He also gives several examples of people who have done in the past, emphasizing the importance of fighting with knowledge and detachment, steering clear of personal attractions and aversions. So Krishna summarizes in these words, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasadhyatma chetasa nirashar nirmamo bhutva yuddhasya vigatajvara. Without any personal motto, fight. Responding to Arjun's query about the cause of improper action, Krishna identifies lust as the adversary, and he advises Arjun to regulate his senses and also identify oneself as servant of Krishna. And this will help to conquer the forceful enemy of lust through spiritual strength and deliberate intelligence. This is very important. Then next is chapter 4, which dives into the transcendental knowledge, explaining the significance of the disciplic parampara, Guru Shishya parampara, of getting the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, and expounding on the Krishna's, his appearance, mission and ultimate goal of devotional service. The soul is eternal, and its relationship with Krishna is also highlighted here, emphasizing the necessity of approaching a bona fide spiritual master. So it's said in there, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Krishna then informs Arjun that his knowledge is very old, and explained how Krishna, being supreme immortal person, remembers everything. Krishna explained why he takes birth, and also he explains that why he do not take birth in other sense. So first he says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srujamyaham. And he further says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam, like that. So this is the reason Krishna takes birth. As Krishna glorifies the transcendental knowledge, chapter 4 concludes with a call for Arjun to arm himself with this knowledge, which burns away all the sinful reactions, and engage in the right path. And the righteous path here is battle, fight. So Krishna says, Tasmat anjana sambhutam hridasam jnana sammatam chittasam samshayam yogam attishtotishtha bharata. In chapter 5, Arjuna, perplexed by seeming contradiction between action and knowledge. So because Krishna explained two things, so Arjuna was confused. Arjun seeks clarification. Krishna explains that the renunciation involves being detached from results of work, not the work itself. And Krishna emphasizes the importance of performing one's duty for the satisfaction of Supreme Person, and by fixing his consciousness on the Supreme and recognizing Krishna as the true enjoyer, the soul attains genuine peace beyond the material world. So material world is very, very temporary. It is everywhere described in Vedic scriptures. Then the chapter 6 explore different aspects of yoga, including meditation, Dhyana yoga, and few other types of yoga, which are traditional yoga systems, with Krishna emphasizing the significance of practicing yoga with determination and constant effort to overcome the obstinate mind. 6th chapter also introduces Arjun's question about the fate of an unsuccessful yogi. It's a very kind of unique thing to our Vedic scriptures, to which Krishna responds that such a yogi will be born in the family of wise transcendentalists and naturally be drawn to yogic practices. Shuchinam Srimatam Kehe Yoga Brashto Bhajayate. This concludes the first hexate or Shadagam of Bhagavad Gita. Now let's get into the second Shadagam of Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 7, Krishna imparts knowledge about himself and his opulent energies, his forms and different things which he does, stressing the importance of surrendering unto him and for true understanding and final destination. So Krishna also says, Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudalabha. After many lifetimes, one realizes that Krishna is everything. Vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudalabha. That person is very rare. And the chapter concludes with Krishna explaining that those who worship him with devotion can truly know him and understand him. Then chapter 8 goes deep into the topics of Brahma, Karma and the demigods, Devatas. Krishna reveals that confidential knowledge of remembering him at the time of death, and he also emphasizes on the fact that one attains the destination based on their final thoughts. So whatever you think at the time of death, prayana kale manasa chalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bruvor madhye pranam avesha samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam. The chapter underscores the efficacy of constant remembrance of Krishna as a means to reach the eternal spiritual world. In chapter 9, Krishna continues to expound on the knowledge about himself. Emphasizing the confidential nature of this knowledge, he explains his role as the controller of the entire cosmos and the importance of surrendering unto him in devotion. Chapter 10 to 12, Krishna explains his opulences. He also shows his opulences to Arjuna, divine manifestations and his universal form. Arjun, having witnessed Krishna's universal form, seeks confirmation. Okay, do you accept me as your devotee? Because now I understand who you are. Krishna explains the supremacy of engaging in his personal service and also confirms that Arjun that okay, yes, you are my devotee. And the chapter culminates, especially chapter number 11 culminates in Arjun acknowledging Krishna as the supreme person. So Arjun says, Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibham. Arjun accepts Krishna's supremacy. He also says that okay, others also accept and I also accept. Now everybody accepts you as a supreme person. And now comes chapter 12 where Arjun asks Krishna directly what is better, to worship you in impersonal or direct worship through the bhakti yoga. So Krishna accepts both paths. Okay, you can worship impersonal, you can go bhakti. But he warns Arjun about the dangers of the path of impersonal worship. Krishna talks about bhakti yoga and how bhakti is the only means to attain him. He will talk about this in another video. So this concludes the second Shadagam of Bhagavad Gita, second hexade of Bhagavad Gita. And now we get into the last Shadagam of Bhagavad Gita, which is chapter 13 to 18. Chapter 13 introduces the field of activity and the knower of the field of activity. Krishna explains the distinction between body, soul and the super soul within, and also highlights the process of knowledge as the means of transcending the dualities and attain the supreme destination, spiritual world. In the chapter 14, Krishna discusses the three modes of material nature in detail, Sattva, Raja and Tamo, which is goodness, passion and ignorance, and their influence on the living entity. Krishna emphasizes that the devotional service or the bhakti is the means to transcend these modes and attain the spiritual kingdom, the spiritual world, and also to attain the constitutional position of purity and happiness, which is our true nature, Satchidananda Rupa. In chapter 15, Krishna uses the analogy of a Ashwatha Vraksha, a banyan tree, to illustrate the material world and urges Arjun to detach himself from this material world tree, cut this tree through the weapon of detachment and surrender. Masanga shastrena drodhena chitva. The chapter emphasizes the importance of surrendering to Krishna for liberation. Chapter 16 contrasts godly and demonic qualities. Krishna explains the demonic mentality and its consequences. He explains the true nature of demonic people. Krishna concludes by emphasizing the importance of following the scriptures and also urges Arjun to keep his divine qualities intact because he was born with the divine qualities. So, and also he warns against disregarding the scriptures. In chapter 17, Krishna answers Arjun's query that those who do not follow scriptures, because 16 ended with follow the scriptures. So now what if somebody doesn't follow the scriptures but worship according to their own imagination? So here Krishna describes the three modes of worships and faith and activities based on the nature of the person. So the chapter concludes with Krishna stressing on the insignificance of activities devoid of devotional service. And in the final chapter, 18th chapter, Krishna reviews the knowledge presented throughout the Bhagavad Gita. He concludes and summarizes, not exactly summarizes, but he concludes, and Krishna underscores the practice of devotional service and concludes by encouraging Arjuna to surrender into him, Krishna, and emphasizing that true renunciation involves acting for Krishna, working for Krishna. So that's why Krishna orders him, okay, just go and fight. Following the order of Paramatma, Supersoul, Krishna, as he inspires Arjuna and become detached from the fruit of activities. In the end, after absorbing Krishna's teaching, Arjuna is ready to engage in the battle. And now, coming back to Sanjay, who is narrating entire conversation to Dhritarashtra, expresses his awe at the universal form. He has just seen the universal form and now he remembers. And he foretells the victory for Arjuna because he is the surrendered devotee. Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishna Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhuti Dhruva Niti Matirmama. And with this, we conclude our today's session. Hopefully, you got some understanding of Bhagavad Gita and its flow. We'll bring more such videos to you. So stay tuned with us for this. And thank you very much for being with us. Namaskar.